Today, we're going to dive into one of the most dramatic, controversial, and, in the end, tragic spiritual movements in African history, the Lumpa Church of Zambia. It's a powerful story of revival, rebellion, and what happens when a fire of faith just burns a little too bright. And that really is the central question of this whole story, isn't it? How does a movement that's all about repentance and singing hymns end up in a violent, deadly conflict with its own government? Well, to even begin to understand how this happened, we've got to focus on one person, a woman from a rural village who rose up to command the absolute loyalty of tens of thousands, and in doing so, challenged the authority of the state itself. Okay, so let's get into it. To really understand Alice Lenshina's incredible rise, we first have to look at the world she was born into, because the ground was already incredibly fertile for a brand new kind of spiritual movement. You see, Christianity didn't just arrive in this region overnight. It came in waves. First you had explorers, then came the missionaries. And all of this eventually created a real desire among local Africans for a church that felt like it was truly theirs, not just some European import. So by the 1950s, this had created a deep spiritual hunger. The missionary churches often felt, distant. They weren't really addressing the day-to-day fears people had, especially the very real fear of witchcraft. People were just ready for a leader who actually understood their world. And right into this environment, this perfect storm, steps a seemingly ordinary woman from a small village. She taps directly into that spiritual hunger, and, she changes everything. Her name was Alice Malenga Mubisha, and her background was totally ordinary. No formal schooling, just living a typical rural life. Honestly, nothing about her suggested she was about to become one of the most important figures in the entire country. But the huge turning point comes in 1953. She gets incredibly sick and then recovers with this unbelievable story. She claims she had literally died, visited heaven, met Jesus face to face, and was given a divine mission. This powerful, dramatic calling became the absolute foundation of her entire movement. Her followers called their new faith the Lumpa Church, and the name itself is basically a declaration of purpose. In the local Bemba language, Lumpa means better than all others. They truly believed her revelation was a purer, more direct form of Christianity than anything the missionaries had to offer. And her message was incredibly powerful. She preached this really strict moral code, rejecting things like polygamy and drinking. But, crucially, she took the fear of witchcraft head-on. She blended all of this with these amazing indigenous hymns set to drums. That music became a primary way she spread her message, completely replacing old village songs with new songs of faith. But you know what happens when something grows that fast, right? As the movement absolutely exploded in popularity, it was set on an unavoidable collision course. And not just with the old churches, but with the government itself. I mean, the speed and scale of her influence was just staggering. Take a look at this number. By 1958, that's just 5 years after her vision, she had more than 50,000 followers. She had become a major power in the region, a force that nobody could ignore anymore. And what this meant was she was suddenly facing a battle on two fronts. On one side, you have the missionaries calling her a heretic, saying she's misleading people. And on the other side, you have colonial officials getting really nervous about her ability to mobilize thousands of people completely outside their control. And this is where the movement crosses a really critical line. By creating their own self-sufficient villages and telling their followers to stop paying colonial taxes, they weren't just a church anymore. In effect, they were building a state within a state. This is where the conflict turns deadly. Just as Zambia is fighting for its independence, Lenshina's followers refused to join any political parties. They saw their allegiance as being to God and God alone. But to the nationalists who were trying to build a new country, this looked a lot like treason. And this refusal to compromise, to bend even a little, it sets the stage for a tragic final chapter, one that would cement Alice Lenshina's very complex legacy. Right before Zambia officially became independent, the whole thing just erupted into violence. The army was sent in, hundreds of her followers were killed, Alice Lenshina surrendered, her church was outlawed, and she would spend the rest of her life either in prison or under house arrest, completely and totally silenced. So, how do we look back on her today? Prophet or rebel? Well, it's just not that simple. She wasn't just some political rebel. She was a religious reformer who empowered rural Africans and really forged a unique Zambian Christian identity. But her absolute refusal to compromise was also deeply divisive, and it led to terrible tragedy when it smashed up against the authority of a brand new state.
When you step back and look at it, her story is this incredible and frankly cautionary tale. It shows you the explosive potential you get at that intersection of deeply held faith and the raw power of the state. Revival can be an amazing force for good, but it can also lead to really devastating conflict.
And all this leaves us with a question that echoes far beyond 1960s Zambia. When absolute spiritual conviction clashes with the demands of political authority, who gets to draw that line between faith and rebellion? It's a question Alice Lenshina's story forces all of us to confront, and it's one that is still so incredibly relevant today.